many of you are just excited and blessed to be here today? Amen? Why don't you just give him a praise offering? Amen? Do you know what happens when you come to Shabbat and you honor Shabbat? Shabbat literally holds within it the key to your restoration and your restitution. And it doesn't matter what may be going on in your life. It doesn't matter what circumstances you may be going through. It doesn't matter what needs you may have, because when you honor Shabbat, in Genesis chapter 2, Yahweh said it was finished. It's done. And so when you come to Shabbat, whatever area that may be like, it doesn't matter. It's finished. It's done. And we are recognizing and acknowledging that that need, whatever's taking place, it's already been met. It's already taken care of. Even whether I see it or don't see it, whether it's manifest right now in my life or not, it doesn't matter, because on Shabbat, he made me a promise. It's complete. It's done. The price has already been paid, and here I am acknowledging and claiming that that's about to be made manifest in my life. Amen? In fact, when you look in Genesis chapter 2, it was amazing to me, because when he says that he finished and then he rests on this day, on Shabbat, the word for finish, it's kala. It's the word for bride. All of creation was made for the purpose of revealing his glory to his bride. And yet his bride, in Proverbs, we learn that the bride, the good wife, she's the crown to her husband. So when we honor Shabbat, the kala, the bride, becomes his crown and restores him in creation. Do you realize how significant Shabbat is? Not only is it your restoration, but simultaneously, as he's restoring in your life, you're restoring him. You're restoring the glory of his name. You're restoring him in his position as king over all of creation. Amen? That's powerful to me. Don't miss Shabbat. Don't neglect the opportunity to crown him as king, to give him the honor that's due to him. Amen? As Shepherd John was referencing, this week's Torah portion, it's re'eh, to see, to behold. And it was quite comical to me, because this has been the most difficult portion in teaching to put together in quite a long time. And yet the Torah portion is see, behold, watch, just look. I'm trying. And yet, I believe if you'll remove your preconceived notions of what we think a blessing is, of what we think it means to be a people of blessing, you'll see the true intention, I believe, of what Yahweh was attempting to reveal to Israel then and to Israel now. Re'eh, see. It's taken from Deuteronomy chapter 11, verse 26 through chapter 16, verse 17, and it opens up emphasizing the importance of keeping the commandments, as Israel is right here on the threshold preparing to enter into the promised land, the land of their inheritance. 40 years ago, they were made a promise when they left Egypt. They've been in the wilderness a long time, and yet they're right here on the cusp. They can almost taste it. They can see it. It's right over there. That's what I promised you. And yet he reminds them directly before crossing that threshold and entering in to the inheritance that he's given them, he reminds them there's a choice that's being presented between blessings and curses. And it was interesting to note that in the Hebrew language, re'eh, behold, see, it's singular. You see. How many of you realize that you are responsible for seeing for yourself? I cannot make you see. I cannot change or cause you to have this vision. You have to see. And yet he goes on, he says, you see, and yet the phrase before you, that he's setting this before you, the blessing and curse is being set before you. In Hebrew, it's lifneikim, and it's plural. You personally are charged to see and understand, yet simultaneously he's reminding you that your ability or lack thereof will affect more than just yourself. Do you think perhaps it's revealing both the effect it has on the nation as a whole? Your vision will affect your household, your community, but it will also have an effect generationally. Your vision will affect the generations after you. Israel that was standing there, that generation, they were the fruit of the previous generation's lack of proper vision. That's why they hadn't entered in yet. The previous generation didn't have the correct vision. And now we find that they themselves are being challenged to see for themselves in order to enter into the land of their inheritance. And it seems to infer that our ability to take hold of that proper vision is going to determine who is capable of entering in to the promised land, into the blessings, into what Yahweh has in store for you. It would seem that having the correct vision is important. Understanding what it means to have that vision. And how many realize that this word re'eh, and we're going to get into it in a little bit later, it's literally also inferring a prophetic vision, something that's not yet made manifest. In other words, this may be where I am right now. I may be in the wilderness. I may have been wandering around seemingly for 40 years, but it doesn't negate the fact that he gave me a vision. He gave me a promise, and I'm specifically staying on the path that will direct me to that place. Amen? Now, in Deuteronomy chapter 11, verse 26 through 28, it starts off this Torah portion. It says, "Behold, I set before you this day a blessing and a curse. A blessing if you obey the commandments of Yahweh your Elohim, which I command you this day, and a curse if you will not obey the commandments of Yahweh your Elohim, but turn aside out of the way, which I command you this day, to go after other gods which you have not known." And first we're going to focus on this concept. He tells them that he's setting before them the ability to see blessing and a curse. We find that as Israel waits for the manifestation of the promised word they've been given, the inheritance, their attention is called to understanding blessing and curses. And it seems to infer the language here in the Hebrew that the previous generation lacked that understanding. And their very access to the land depends upon them correctly understanding what's being set before them. So it causes us to ask the question, what does it mean to be blessed? And why are we blessed? Because how many realize that the world has a very different definition? The world will tell you that to be blessed means money, fame, fortune. The things of this world that are perishable. The things of this world that can be quickly taken away from you and destroyed. And yet Yahweh's trying to teach Israel above and beyond that I have a blessing for you. But you have to have the correct mindset. You have to have the correct vision to understand truly what this blessing is and what it means to be a caretaker of that blessing. We find that Israel is instructed here that the blessing and the curse will be placed when they enter into the land. Moshe begins to give them some details here regarding a covenant ceremony that Moshe will not even be there for. This will take place once they've entered into the land. They are commanded to go to Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal, and the blessing and the curse will be put upon these two mountains when they enter. When you begin to look, it's quite interesting because Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal are the two mountains that border the valley of Shechem. Shechem, when you go back and look at Abraham, and you look at Isaac, and you look at Jacob, all the things that take place at Shechem, Shechem is literally the gateway into the promised land. Shechem means shoulders. So when he tells them and he begins to convey to the children of Israel that I'm setting before you a blessing and a curse in this elaborate ceremony that's going to take place, the picture that they're being given is that of shouldering the responsibilities of the covenant. This is the opportunity that's being given to them. Could it be that the purpose of the wilderness journey was to see how Israel would handle this responsibility before they ever had access to the tangible blessing? Could it be that the wilderness journey was to train Israel for this very task? And that causes us to ask the question, if you've been given a promise, if you've been given a blessing that maybe you haven't quite accessed yet, but you know that was a sent word from him, where you are right now, could it be that it's for the same purpose? It's preparing you for when that vision is made manifest. It's preparing you for when the tangible inheritance now comes into your hands to make sure you're ready and you know exactly how to handle it and to care for it. Now, pay attention to the parallels. It's quite interesting because these two mountains, when they go into the land, some of the details are given here, but the rest are given later in the book of Deuteronomy and in the book of Joshua. When they go into the land to these two mountains, Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim, there are specific instructions given. 6 tribes will stand on one mountain, the mountain of blessings, and 6 tribes will stand on the other mountain, the mountain of curses. And they will read the blessings and the curses, and this elaborate ceremony will take place for Israel to understand what they now are taking on, shouldering the responsibilities of this covenant. Well, it was interesting to me because 6 tribes are on each of the mountains, literally each of the shoulders, 6 on this shoulder and 6 on this shoulder. In Exodus chapter 28, verse 12, there's a description given regarding the clothing of the high priest. It says, "And thou shalt put the 2 stones upon the shoulders of the ephod for stones of memorial unto the children of Israel. And Aaron shall bear their names before Yahweh upon his 2 shoulders for a memorial." And so I believe there's a connection here that when you see these 2 mountains, 6 tribes on each one, it's literally the picture of the garments of the high priest. 6 on each shoulder. Remember that the land is laid out in the form of a man, just like the tabernacle and the temple. The promised or the Debar land is symbolic of the man, the Messiah, laid out upon the earthen altar. As the tribes stand upon these 2 mountains, they're literally adorning this man as the high priest. They literally are becoming these memorial stones on either of his shoulders, and he now bears their names as a memorial before Yahweh when they enter into the land of their inheritance. It seems in that part of the requirement for entering was acknowledging the great high priest. In other words, you want to access your inheritance, you want to access the blessings and the promises that he has for you as a people, Israel, you must acknowledge the one who is the great Kohen Hagadol. He's the door and the access way to your promise. And we find that as they are preparing to be restored, as Israel's preparing to be restored to what rightfully should be their inheritance, simultaneously they're restoring his role as the high priest of the earth. And we find that along with bearing these names, the shoulders of this man, the Messiah, also bears the blessing and a curse. It seems to be once again reiterated in Isaiah chapter 9, verse 6, the government is on his shoulders. He's the one that carries the authority and the ability to give them access to what is their inheritance. When you look at the term blessing and a curse in Hebrew, it's barakah ukelala, and it has a numerical value of 398, which makes an interesting connection because it's the same value as the Hebrew word chafshi, Strong's number 2670, and it's the word for free, freedom from slavery. In context, it's used to describe the one who is set free during the Shemitah year. And so now when we're told that this man, that they are now adorning as the priest, as they place the tribes upon the shoulders, upon these 2 mountains, that upon his shoulders is the government, literally upon his shoulders is the ability to declare the Shemitah year. Upon his shoulders is the ability to declare the one that's about to be set free. Now, it's no accident that the Shemitah laws are highlighted in this very Torah portion, and it seems to emphasize their connection to these blessings and curses. In fact, immediately after, as you close out chapter 11, where he opens up, I'm setting before you blessings and curses, go and look at some of the other commandments he begins to highlight. It's quite interesting because he highlights the appointed times, he highlights the Shemitah, he highlights the location where his name will be. It has everything to do about his role, acknowledging and honoring who he is as they enter into the land of their inheritance. We find that every 7th year, every Shemitah year, is a sabbatical year. The land is to rest, debts are forgiven, inheritance is restored, and those who were in bondage or slavery are set free. Simultaneously, at the 7th year, we find that the Torah was declared every 7th year. In Deuteronomy chapter 31, verses 10 through 11, it brings in this connection to the Shemitah year. How many realize that you've been set free in order to hear his word? Amen? And so we find here, as we begin to delve into the Hebrew language here and look at some of these connections, it seems to reveal that your access to your inheritance, your restoration, your Shemitah, your time of release, the set time for you to be released and set free and restored, is at the releasing and proclaiming of His word. This man that they've approached and now stand before. At the releasing of His word, they are restored. They are set free. And we find that this is the promise that's embedded within the Baraka and the Ukhalala, the blessing and curse that is set before Israel. You can be restored, set free. You can access your Shemitah if you will acknowledge this man that you've come before him, if you will bring honor to him at the releasing of His word, you're restored, Israel. Looking further at this Shemitah connection, we find that when we honor the Shemitah, literally when the land was allowed to have a Shabbat, when the land was allowed to rest, how many realize that simultaneously it restored and honored the Messiah's inheritance as high priest and king of the earth? The Shabbat was made for man. The Shabbat is your restoration. The Shemitah is Yahweh's. The Shemitah is the restoration of the role of Mashiach as the king and high priest. So we find that when we neglect these responsibilities, because we have denied the king his inheritance, what belongs to him, then Israel too is removed from their inheritance because they've neglected their covenant responsibilities. Hence the reason Israel is removed and exiled when they refuse to honor the Sabbath for the land. And so we find that literally for those that can see, those that can re'eh, I believe he's revealing to you that he ties his inheritance to his people and your inheritance is tied to him. He's the door to your restoration, and you are restored for the purpose of restoring his name. Amen? Could it be revealing that what Israel, and literally you and I, are being challenged to see and understand in regards to the responsibility of the Baraka, Ukelala, a blessing and a curse, literally these covenant responsibilities, is that this is what will open the door to your Shemitah, your release, your restoration, and your freedom? That when we honor our covenant responsibilities such as the Shabbat, such as the Shemitah, such as the appointed times, when we honor him, then his promise to you is to see you restored and set free. Amen? Now, further building on this, when you look, all this would take place at these two mountains, Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim, and the valley of Shechem. Shechem has a numerical value of 360. It's the same value as the Hebrew word Meltzar. Meltzar means a guardian, an officer of the court, an overseer, someone in authority over designated areas. Literally, it seems as if Israel is brought here to be entrusted as an overseer and given authority over a designated area that has previously been lost or denied. So we have to ask, what exactly is being restored here that Israel had lost, that's directly connected as well to their access to the land of their inheritance? Well, in order to answer this, let's continue to look at this. Let's look at the term for blessing. He's setting before them a blessing. He's setting before them an opportunity to be entrusted with something and given authority over it that previously they had lost access to. The word blessing. It's Strong's number 1293, Baraka, and it means a blessing, good favor, but it can also infer a treaty of peace. They will once again be at peace with the great king. Amen? The numerical value of this term for blessing equals 227. It's the same as the Hebrew word zakar. Strong's number 2142, it means to remember, to recall, or to call to mind. It's the root of the word zikron, memorial. Remember earlier we looked at the high priest. He bears the names upon his shoulders as a memorial, as a zikron. We find that as Israel is obedient to accept and shoulder the responsibilities of this covenant, the blessing that they are promised is that they will be remembered. Their names are lifted up before Yahweh. They are, as Shepherd John was alluding to, they are zakar. They are marked. They are remembered. When in the wilderness seasons, how many of you realize it can seem as if your flesh will tell you you've been forgotten? Yahweh's done forgot he left you wandering around that mountain. He's already forgotten what your need was, what you're going through. That's why you haven't had an answer. That's why you're still there. Your flesh will tell you you've been forgotten. And yet the promise that we're reminded of is that we are remembered. Amen? He will remember me. My blessing is that regardless of what may happen, the one capable of bringing restoration remembers me. And it's for his name's sake, because he's tied his inheritance to his people. So for his name's sake, he will see his people restored, and his people will restore his name. Amen? How many realize that when all of the titles that describe who he is, he's Yahweh Ropheka, he's Yahweh your healer. How is that name restored? When I experience healing in my life. He's Yahweh Nisi, he's Yahweh my banner. How is that name restored? When he manifests and is the banner over me in my life. He's Yahweh Shalom, he's Yahweh my peace. That name is manifested and restored when I experience and have that shalom in my life. He's Yahweh Yireh. You can go on and on. The scriptures are filled with the names of Elohim. Why? Because it's your responsibility to see that name restored, to see that name honored. Amen? Now, baraka, when you look at this word for blessing, it forms a play on words with Bekorah. It's the same Hebrew letters, just a slightly different order. Bekorah, Strong's number 1062, is translated as meaning birthright, or the right of the firstborn. Remember, they've been brought to Shechem to have something restored to them that had been previously lost or denied. Do you think perhaps that in this ceremony that's taking place, that it's a hidden clue that what's about to be restored and Israel is about to have access to is the Bekorah? The right of the firstborn. The baraka, the blessing, always goes hand in hand with the Bekorah, the birthright of the firstborn. The birthright deals with both inheritance and priesthood. The firstborn was to have a double portion of the inheritance, a double blessing. Why? Because he was responsible for the house of his father. He was also charged with being the high priest of that family name. In fact, it seems that this choice between a blessing or a curse in regards to the firstborn is actually seen played out in a conversation between Jacob and Rebekah, his mother, as Jacob prepares to receive the blessing from his father, Isaac. And when you go back and look in Genesis chapter 27, verse 12, the English makes it seem as if that Jacob is attempting to steal the blessing from his brother Esau. And it looks as if this is being done under suspicious means, and yet when you go back and you read the entire passage of the story of Jacob and Esau, you'll find that Jacob had already received the birthright, the Bekorah. In other words, Jacob had already received the responsibility. Esau sold this in Genesis chapter 25. Esau was not interested in being the priesthood. Esau was not interested in caring for the inheritance or caring for his father's name and his father's house. Therefore, Jacob has every right to the blessing, to the inheritance, as he has shouldered the responsibility. In Genesis chapter 27, verse 12, you see this. It says, "And I shall seem to him," speaking of Isaac, "as a deceiver, and I shall bring a curse upon me and not a blessing." In fact, it's the second time actually you see this concept of a blessing or a curse. How many of you realize that you have the right to petition your father for the blessing when you've been shouldering the responsibility of the birthright? This is what I believe Yahweh is attempting through Moshe to reveal to the children of Israel. When you've been diligently shouldering the responsibility of the birthright, when you've been shouldering the responsibility of the covenant, then you have every right to petition him for the blessing that goes along with it. But if they're not willing to shoulder the responsibility of the birthright, they have no right to come and petition him for the blessing. Now, the Hebrew literally reveals that he's setting before them a birthright. I set before you this day a blessing and a curse. It's literally connected. I'm setting before you this day a birthright. a blessing that entails a land of inheritance and the opportunity to walk as a kingdom of priests if they will choose to take on his name. This is what previously had been lost or denied to them, and now the opportunity is being presented before them. It seems then that this begins to redefine and give us a different view of what it means to be presented of what's being presented here to Israel. What it means to either be walking in blessings or curses. It seems the proper definition is found within the context of the right of the firstborn. It seems as they prepared to access their promised inheritance, they're reminded of the responsibility they have to that inheritance. It goes hand in hand with the mantle of the firstborn. The role of the firstborn was to continue on the name of the Father. The covenant responsibilities, it seems, are a reflection of one another. The Messiah bears the names of Israel as a zikron, as a memorial, and simultaneously Israel's tasked with lifting up, literally manifesting and revealing his name. They are restored to bring restoration. You are blessed to be a blessing, is the way he phrased it to Abraham. So now you can begin to realize, my goodness, the restoration of his people, Israel, it's for his great namesake. You're restored to see his name restored. Amen? In Exodus chapter 4, verse 22, Israel is identified by Yahweh as his firstborn son, his Bechori. It says, "And thou shalt say unto Pharaoh, Thus saith Yahweh, Israel is my son, even my firstborn." Once again, it's the firstborn who receives the blessing, the inheritance, and who is to operate in the role of the priest, all for the purpose of continuing on the Father's name, and he's charged with extra responsibilities in regards to the entire house. And we find it's this very role that the previous generation that just died off in the wilderness rejected, and they did not see properly. Because of this, we find they are removed from the position of the heir and the firstborn. They choose to release their Bekorah, the land of their inheritance, and the role of priest, just like Esau did. Now, it's no accident that when Israel rejects the role of priest, which is part of that blessing, part of that birthright, the term used to describe their condition is the same Hebrew term that describes one that has lack of vision. In Exodus chapter 32, verse 25, while they are camped at Mount Sinai and they're preparing to be initiated into this, to become a kingdom of priests, we find that Israel rejects this role and they're found instead worshiping the golden calf. And the verse regarding when Moshe finds out what's taking place, it says, "When Moshe saw that the people were naked, para, for Aaron had made them naked, para, unto their shame among their enemies." Exodus 32, verse 25. The term to describe their condition in Hebrew is para. In Proverbs chapter 29, verse 18, it's the same word to describe a people that have no vision. Where there is no vision, the people perish, para. But he that keepeth the law, happy is he. Let's look at that term. You perish without vision, and they're made naked is the same term. It's Strong's number 6544, para, and it means to let go, to let loose, to be loosened from restraint, to avoid or neglect, to let go unbridled. The first time this term is used is in Exodus chapter 5, verse 4, and it's regarding Moshe and Aaron petitioning for Israel to be set free, para, from their work for Pharaoh. Now here in Exodus, the same meaning is still being carried here of being let loose, to be let free from your work. Yet now we find here in Exodus, Israel has removed themselves from the work of the kingdom. They have para. They are unbridled. They are unrestrained. They've neglected it. They've avoided it. I don't want to have anything to do with it. They've neglected and avoided it, and because of that, because they did not have the proper vision, they didn't understand. Without proper vision regarding their role as the firstborn and the responsibilities that come with it, they then are cut off from the very blessings they were redeemed in order to access. And now we find this next generation has been raised up in the wilderness, and they're being presented before them the same opportunity. They're being presented before them the right to have a birthright. to be called once again the firstborn, to take on the mantle of this inheritance and this blessing, and to do the proper diligence regarding what Yahweh's about to entrust them with. Now, in fact, because of that generation's rejection of this mantle, the generation that was brought out of Egypt, we find that the birthright is divided. Because remember, we've already looked at the fact that the right of the firstborn, it dealt with the inheritance, and it dealt with being the priest of the house. We find that once this takes place, when Israel rejects this role, the birthright's divided. Levi takes the priesthood, but he has no part of the land inheritance. The tribes access their land inheritance, but they have no part of the priesthood. Neither one is seen as trustworthy or capable of handling this mantle properly, and we find that it's not until Messiah that we see a reuniting of the two as he restores priesthood and kingship together. Amen? Much like this generation here, we too find ourselves in this same position. We're in need of a restoration. We have not had access to the blessing or the birthright. It seems as if there's been a reversal of the roles of Jacob and Esau. Previously, Esau sold it to Jacob. But now it seems as if there's been a reversal of roles, and Esau has tricked Jacob into letting go of his birthright and his inheritance. We find that Esau and the system that's birthed from him, because literally Rome comes from Esau, Edom. Rome, the Roman system, the Babylonian world system, all different names, but it's the same system. It's the system of the beast. We find has tricked Jacob into selling his birthright and the inheritance, and the people have become desolate. They're enslaved without a standing, and yet this passage begins to reveal how you can be restored. Now, it's no accident that the tentacles of Esau can be found woven within the elite families today, who control the world's power and wealth, from the royal houses to the Vatican, all controlling and manipulating what rightfully should belong to the house of Jacob. In fact, if you go back and you begin to look at some of the edicts that the Catholic Church throughout the years have released, this is the system they've created and built. Go back and look at the Papal Bull Unum Sanctum of 1302, the Eternal Crown Papal Bull of 1481, and the Ecclesiastical See of 1540. All of these edicts issued from the mouth of Esau, all creating a current world system designed to strip Jacob of his inheritance and his standing. And we find that this generation today, much like that generation then, is in need of a Shemitah. You're in need of a Shemitah, a restoration, and what has been promised to you to be restored. And we find that the true king is the only one capable of doing so. In fact, in Ezekiel chapter 35, verse 14 through 15, he prophetically speaks regarding Esau and what's going to happen to Esau in the coming Shemitah when the inheritance is restored. When there's a reversal of roles, when the one that first sold his birthright once again gets truly what's coming to him. In Ezekiel chapter 35, it says, "Thus saith Yahweh Elohim, when the whole earth rejoiceth, I will make you desolate. As thou didst rejoice at the inheritance of the house of Israel, because it was desolate, so will I do unto you. You shall be desolate, O Mount Seir, and all Idumea, even all of it, and they shall know that I am Yahweh." And we find that simultaneously, as he prophesies the desolation of Esau, the one that rejects the birthright, the one that rejected the responsibility of the covenant, Isaiah prophesies of the restoration of Jacob. In Isaiah chapter 49, verse 8, it says, "Thus saith Yahweh, in an acceptable time have I heard thee, and in a day of salvation have I helped thee. And I will preserve thee and give thee for a covenant of the people to establish the earth, to cause to inherit the desolate heritages." That term for desolate is the same term used in Ezekiel to describe how Esau will be made desolate. And when you look at that term desolate, it's Strong's number 8074. It's shamim, and it means desolate, to destroy, appalled, stunned, or to stupefy. Just no words can describe what's about to take place. Here, though, in Isaiah, it's conjugated as shomimot, and the same letters rearranged from the phrase their names, shimotam. It's the phrase found in Exodus chapter 28, verse 12, regarding the names lifted up on the shoulder stones of the high priest. He has promised to restore his people. You are his desolate heritage that will be restored. Amen? That should make you want to shout. Amen? And we find that restoration goes hand in hand with your own inheritance and authority being restored, because as he lifts you up as you lift up his name. And we find that the very ones that rejoiced at your desolation have now become desolate themselves, because he has remembered Jacob. Amen? Now let's look at this title. The title of the Torah portion is Re'eh. What it means to have vision. And it seems that everything that he's revealing to the children of Israel, Moshe is attempting to prepare this generation. They're about to enter in and access their inheritance, but if they don't have proper vision, that inheritance will become desolate, and they will be removed from it. They have to understand the responsibility that's being placed upon their shoulders as they enter in. They're being restored in order to restore his name. They're being restored in order to restore what belongs to him. So it's not just about Israel and who they are. It's about his name. It's about his authority. It's about his government, his kingdom. Let's look at this term, behold. Behold, pay attention. This is what I set before you. This is the opportunity you're being given to be a part of. The term behold, it's Strong's number 7200, ra'ah. It means to see, to look at, to inspect, to perceive, or consider. It can also connote a spiritual observation, to see or have prophetic visions. But it can also mean to provide or procure for oneself. When you look at this, the numerical value of ra'ah, it has a value of 206, and it's the same value as the Hebrew term dabar, the word. To speak, declare, converse, promise, or sing. Israel is being challenged to see the dabar, to see the word. In John chapter 1:1, he speaks of this word. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with Elohim, and the Word was Elohim. It's about drawing close to the one who first gave you the promised word. Amen? In fact, this root term, ra'ah, is found in one of the names or the titles of Yahweh. He is Yahweh Yireh, Jehovah Jireh. So often it's translated as meaning provider. He's my provider. And it does mean that, but it also means Re'eh, to see. He's the one who sees me. In Genesis chapter 22, verse 14, Abraham declares this name upon being challenged to offer up Isaac. In faith, we find that he is obedient because he understands the covenant promises he's been given. And we find because of his obedience, a ram is provided. And at this point, Abraham declares this name, this title of Yahweh. He declares Yahweh Yireh. And I believe the name encompasses both of the meanings provide and to see. Yahweh will provide for the vision and the promise he's given. Amen? Israel is challenged to see the dabar, to see the source of their promise. He will provide for the vision he's given. He will provide for the promise he's given. What's your responsibility, Israel? To shoulder the responsibilities of the covenant and honor his name. He will Yahweh Yireh the situation. Amen? Remember, your Shemitah, your restoration is upon his shoulders. He alone carries the authority and the power to open this door. Israel, draw close to the dabar. Israel, see the dabar. See the word. See the man that you're standing before that will now carry as a memorial your names before the great King of all the earth. Amen? We find that this generation, much like those first hearing these words, is being challenged to see for yourselves. How many of you believe that you've been given a promise, a vision, and maybe perhaps you haven't seen the fullness of that vision or that promise yet? You have a promised inheritance that you have yet to attain, and yet the Torah challenges you, watch as the debar, watch as the source of that word, yireh, provides for the vision as you're obedient to walk it out. It's quite interesting to me because there are multiple Hebrew terms used for see. He chooses specifically re'eh, see and behold. But there's another term in Hebrew, it's kazah, Strong's number 2372. It can also mean to see, to perceive, to look, behold, to prophesy. In fact, the definitions of re'eh and kazah seemingly are synonymous. They almost seem like, what's the difference between these two terms? But there are, when you begin to look carefully, there's some slight nuances. Both terms describe both the action of seeing and paying attention, as well as carry the idea of a prophetical vision. Re'eh, however, goes beyond this initial perceiving of the vision, which is literally what kazah means. It's the initial seeing. You were given a vision. I just saw it, kazah. Re'eh, however, goes beyond this. It means and infers to learn to know, to look after, to visit, to give attention to consider, to reflect on. Re'eh comes into place after kazah. I was given a vision, now I re'eh. I go back, I learn that vision. I pay attention to that vision. I spend time to learn that vision. I consider it, I reflect on it. I continually order my steps according to the vision that I was given. Amen? Re'eh adds the nuanced meaning of a vision that has been given attention to, considered, reflected on, visited, where time has been spent to learn to know this vision, this debar word intimately. Re'eh is not a casual glance. Pay attention, blessings and curses. Oh, okay, I got it. I know what a blessing is. That's where I'm headed. That's not what it means. It's not a casual glance. It also reveals that there is a waiting season from the initial vision, kazah, until its manifestation. And in that season, will you shoulder the responsibility of the vision, even when you don't see the fruit of it? I believe this is what Moshe is challenging the children of Israel. They're way closer than when they left Egypt. But even when they enter into the land, they have to fight for it. There's work to be done. Will they continue to shoulder the work of the vision until they get to enjoy the fruit of it at the end of that labor? Re'eh, do you see, Israel? There's a responsibility that comes with this blessing. There's a responsibility that must be shouldered. You're being given access as a firstborn who has a double portion, who has the blessing, who's been called as a nation of priests, but you must shoulder the responsibility of that birthright. Don't be an Esau. The numerical difference between Re'eh and kazah, Re'eh has a value of 206, kazah has a value of 20. Subtracting one from the other, the difference is 186. It's the value of the Hebrew word makom. Strong's number 4725. Standing place, position, a place of abode or habitation. In fact, the very first thing addressed after the blessings and curses is the makom. In Deuteronomy chapter 12, he immediately goes in to address the makom, the place where he will put his name, a place of standing, a position, a place of his habitation. Makom is from the root kum, and it means to rise, to be established, to make binding, or to confirm, but it can also mean to resurrect. The time frame from the initial kazah vision to when it is made manifest allows for the potential for that vision to become worn out. And if you're not careful, that vision can die. You can parah, you can lose your vision, you can unbridle yourself, you can detach yourself from that vision if you're not careful. This is why you are challenged to re'eh, to see and understand and revisit the vision. Always come back to the word. Always come back to the vision you were given. Amen? Because if you always revisit and come back, then the tendency for you to detach yourself from it is null. Because you're consistently coming back and reaffirming, re-listening, paying attention to, visiting, considering. When we do so, when you continually come back to that word, to that vision, to that promise, you find yourself coming to the makom, the place. It's the place of covenant cutting. It's the place of a status change. It's the place of resurrection. It's where you're resurrected from the dead fleshly man and given life again. It's the place where the word that you were given at the very start of the journey is now confirmed by the one who first spoke it. Israel's inheritance was not dependent upon the enemies in the land, what they had to say, or when they said, we're ready to leave, now you can have it. It didn't work that way. The time for them to receive their Shemitah, their release, was at the word of Yahweh. When he said it, it's time. It's yours. Go get it. Amen. Now, as we continue to look at this term, makom, the place, it's the place where his name is. It's the place of resurrection. It's the place of covenant cutting. It's the place where you experience a status change. It's quite interesting, though, that the first time you see this term, makom, the first reference is in Genesis chapter 1, verse 9. It says, and Elohim said, let the waters under the heaven be gathered together unto one place. Let the waters be gathered together unto one makom, the place. And let the dry land appear, ra'ah. See the dry land. And it was so. The word gathered here, it says that the waters are being gathered together to this one makom, this one place. The term gathered in Strong's number 6960, kavah, and it means to wait, to look for, to hope, to expect, to collect, or to bind together. It's the root of the term tikva, to wait for with hope. The waters, which by the way, waters can be synonymous with a group of people. In other words, the people have been gathered together at the makom. They've been brought to the place where he has put his name, the place of resurrection, the place of covenant cutting, the place where they're going to experience a status change. And as they have gathered and come to the makom, they're waiting. They're looking for, they're expecting, and they're hoping for something because they understand something takes place at the makom. Something happens. The English tells us that the waters are gathered in order for the dry land to appear. Well, the word dry land in Hebrew, it's Strong's number 3004, yabashah, and it means dry land or dry ground. Sounds really exciting, doesn't it? What are you hoping for? Some dry land. But let's look at this. It comes from the root Strong's number 3001, yabesh, and it means to make dry, to wither, to be dry, or become dry. But the same letters that form this term, yabashah, this dry land, rearranged from the Hebrew word Strong's number 7633, shaviyah, and it's translated as captivity or captives. The Hebrew literally begins to reveal that the waters are gathered and waiting expectantly for something that has been held in captivity to be revealed and set free. Doesn't it sound like they're anticipating a Shemitah, a Yovel? They're waiting for something to be released that's been held in bondage. They're waiting for that to be released, to be set free. It was also quite interesting to me that when you look at this term Yabashah, the dry land, it's the same term used to describe the dry bones of Ezekiel chapter 37. They are Yabashah. They are very dry. These bones that are enslaved, they're in bondage, their hope's been cut off. They are Yabashah, but if these bones will come to the makom, if these bones will come to the place, something's about to be set free. Something's about to be restored. Amen? Now, this same root stem, yavesh, that's connected to shavia, captivity or captives, This is a cognate of another Hebrew term. It's Strong's number 7631, shaviv, And you'll find all of these have the same Hebrew letters. They're just in a different order. All of these contain the same Hebrew picture. They're just rearranging to fill out so you can see it now in color. The term shaviv means flames. Specifically, it can mean flames that are split into tongues or sparks. The imagery is directly connected to what took place at the creation of Adam, who is called man, Ish, coming from the root esh in Hebrew for fire. He literally becomes a vessel for the fire, the flames, the shaviv. The same event is revisited at Mount Sinai, where the fiery voice is seen splitting in the tongues, the flames of his tongue are seen upon the mountain. And in the upper room in Acts, when the fire is once again released onto his people, and it's described as flaming tongues of fire. Each of these occasions, the creation of Adam, Israel at Sinai, and the disciples and the people gathered together in the upper room, was the initiation of a priesthood and the laboring to bring forth sons, literally the Bakora, the firstborn. Here, the prophetic imagery then that's seen in this creation account is that of the waters, his people literally gathered and waiting, expectantly with hope for the restoration of that which had been held captive, for his fiery word to be released and made manifest, which would then bring forth his sons from the midst of that fire. Hence, when you come to the Makom, it's for the same purpose. You come with the expectation that the word that we've been given, that previously has been held captive, will be released and made manifest. This is the power unlocked when we learn to have vision, to re'eh, to stay committed to the vision. How many of you realize that you can have a kazah, you can have a prophetic word that was given to you? And if you unbind yourself from that prophetic word and it never comes to pass in your life, was that word wrong? Or was it that you chose to walk away from that word? This is the power of re'eh. If you want to see that word made manifest, you have to learn to come to the makom, to the place. You have to come to where his name is. You have to understand that this is where the transition takes place. This is where it's released. This is where it's made manifest. This is where that which has been bound and held captive now becomes set free and it's made manifest. Amen? The powers that be and this Babylonian world beast system that Esau has set in place. And by the way, it's nothing different than what the serpent did in the garden. What did he do? The first thing he had to do was get Adam to compromise his role as the firstborn. He had to get Adam to compromise the covenant responsibilities that he had been entrusted with. The moment he compromises that, he's able to slip in, and now the inheritance is in bondage. And Adam is removed. Just the same thing that happens with Israel when they enter the promised land. If they don't keep the covenant responsibilities, the inheritance goes into bondage, and Israel is removed. We find the same thing has been done by this world beastly system. They may think that they have full control of the inheritance and the earth, but Israel's being challenged to re'eh, to see and know that it doesn't matter because they have no authority over the return and restoration of his people who have been given a vision, whose names are lifted up on the shoulders of the Mashiach, and they've been given a promise to be remembered. Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 9, it says, "For Yahweh's portion is his people. Jacob is the lot of his inheritance." How many realize that Yahweh will not leave his portion desolate? Yahweh will not leave his portion in bondage. Yahweh will not leave his portion lacking. His portion is his people. He will not leave you in bondage. He will not leave you lacking. He will not have you put to shame. Your restoration is for the purpose of the restoring the standing of his great name. Numbers chapter 6, verse 27, in what's referred to as the priestly benediction, this is the very end of it. He instructs Aaron, this is how you're to bless my people. And it's amazing to me because when you go back and you read the entire priestly benediction, what does the blessing have to do with? It has to do with who he is. It has to do with them having favor with him. It has to do with his face shining upon them. It has to do with his name being revealed to them. And he ends it in verse 27. It says, and they shall put my name upon the children of Israel, and I will bless them. Why? It's for my name's sake. The Makom, where my name is, that dwelling place, as long as you are there, you're promised restoration and restitution because you become his portion. You become his inheritance. His people are his inheritance. You're restored to restore his name. And now you can begin to understand when Israel is told to re'eh, to see and behold, what's the responsibility that you're being entrusted with? You've been given a promise, you've been given a vision, but now you begin to see, oh my goodness, it's not just about me. It's not even just about my family. It's not even just about my generations, but it's all about him. I'm being given an opportunity to crown him as king. I'm being given an opportunity to proclaim him as the Kohen HaGadol, as the great and only high priest. I'm being given an opportunity to cause his great name to be restored. And when his name is restored, all the rest of the nations will be stunned. They will be in complete and utter shock. They won't even be able to speak anything as they are made desolate and his name is restored. That's what you've been called to be a part of. That's the vision you've been given. That's your inheritance and your promise. It's all about restoring his name, his authority, his position. And as you restore him, he restores you. Amen. Shabbat shalom.